How many houses need to be built on that to approach a builder?
That's actually a great question because I have guys out there right now that are trying to help me find land.
What do the expenses look like on the entitlement front? A wide range that people don't really understand. If you could kind of walk us through what that process looks like, because you're the one kind of taking the risk on.
Lenders didn't know how to go about short sales. They didn't know how to go about what it's worth and everything else. So there was a whole process that had to be created. Nowadays they have a lot more streamlined, so a short sale shouldn't take that long.
Businesses with this company, largest transfer project. Baby boomers just coming of age. Buy a 30 something bad.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the KB podcast. Kylie here. I got two of my executives with me, Daniel and Andrew. Today, we're going to be jumping more into real estate and every aspect of real estate. So I've been through a lot of it. I know my colleagues have been as well. We're going to jump a lot into the development. They're going to hammer me with some questions. Basically, we're getting a lot of questions from our audience of how do you get into real estate? And that could be fix and flips. That could be short sales. There's a million ways to get into real estate, wholesaling, development. We're going to go through all the different paths of getting into real estate and how you could do it with little to no money or ways to make a lot of money just in different realms. So Andrew, Daniel, welcome, guys. Appreciate you guys jumping on with us. We're going to get started. So where would you want to jump in on the real estate industry? What are you seeing that's making money right now? And what have you experienced in the past?
I think we've all got that friend or maybe somebody listening to this has said, I want to get into real estate, or I'm going to get into real estate, and it oftentimes it never happens because they don't know where to start. Personally, I actually got started in somewhat of an unorthodox channel, and that is in tax liens, tax deeds, basically assuming ownership of people's properties if they don't pay their property taxes. I've got some land in Arizona, completely sight unseen. All I had to do was satisfy the tax debt, and then I was able to foreclose on the property. But I know like you said, there's dozens of different channels that someone could make an entry. I just, when I got into it, I needed something that was cheap because I didn't have money. I've got a little bit more money now, but when I got started, I didn't have any. So, I just had like a few $100s here and there to work with.
What do you think the easiest way to get into real estate for someone that's coming in new that doesn't have a lot of money? I mean, you guys could hammer me on this as well, but what do you guys see as the easiest way to get into that market?
I think first and foremost, like finding somebody that knows what the heck they're doing and finding out what they're familiar with. But I think generally speaking, when people think of real estate, they think of multifamily and fix and flips. I think fix and flip is a big one.
I think both of you guys know like how I got into real estate. If you don't know, I'll run through it real quick. So I got started in like 07, 08, and probably more 08 because when I quit what I was doing, I grew up racing pro motocross and all that fun stuff, and then went into personal training massage for a little while, which wasn't a big fan of, but I got into real estate in 08. So during that time frame, what was going on in 2008, if you guys remember?
Financial crash.
Yeah. And it was the best time to make money with no money, or make money with no money. So for me, and that's happening again right now, guys. So anybody that doesn't know that's happening, there's a bunch of fourclosures right now, and that's increasing tremendously just because of what's going on with the market. But I got into real estate and I started short selling homes. You don't need any money to do it. Maybe a little bit, but barely. Maybe set up an LLC, find a good accountant, stuff like that, which we've talked about on our prior podcast. But when you're doing short sales, there's no money out of pocket. So what you're going in and doing, for me, it was, and kind of like your tax deeds, tax liens, those are low money out of pocket. But for short sales, there was no money. So I would go in, I would try to buy a house. Let's say it was mortgaged for, just give you an example, 4315 Indian Deer Road, Windermere, Florida. You guys can look it up online. They mortgaged it for almost $600,000. And that was in 05, 06. I negotiated that short sale. I think that was 09, maybe 2010. I ended up buying it for $178,000. No money out of pocket because the lender hard moneyed it for me for whatever it was, 2 hours. And there's ways of doing it with no money as well. And then I had the back end buyer buy it for like $230,000, $240,000. I don't remember the exact number, but I made about $27,000 off that one deal. But it took me approximately 12 months because back then lenders didn't know how to go about short sales. They didn't know how to go about what it's worth and everything else. So there was a whole process that had to be created. Nowadays they have a lot more streamlined. So a short sale shouldn't take that long. But I negotiated over 100 of them at any given time on top of loan modifications, which kept basically the bills paid at that time because I could do a loan mod pretty quick for people, and I would negotiate those short sales and make good chunks of money. Sometimes $5,000, sometimes $100,000 per deal. But if you have 100 of them going, a lot of money that comes in throughout that interim.
Well, for someone that does not speak real estate, what in the world is a short sell?
Great question. So anybody that's behind on their mortgage payments, which was a vast majority of people back in 07, 08, I would basically pitch them, which this is the truth, but I pitch them, listen, if you let it go through foreclosure, Daniel, you're going to have a foreclosure on your record for 7 to 10 years. It just stays there just like a bankruptcy does for 7 to 10 years. I could take over your deed. You'll transfer it over to me. I will do a short sell on it, which a lot of times I'd put it into a trust so you don't have seasoning issues, because there was a lot of seasoning stuff back with mortgages back then. But I would put it into a trust, and I would end up negotiating that short sell where they're behind on payments and dismissing the debt. So on their credit, it would just say late payments and satisfied, after we negotiated the short sell and it was dismissed, instead of a 7 to 10 year deficiency or whatever it shows. I don't remember what it showed. I know it showed a foreclosure, but I don't remember the exact wording. So it'd say something along foreclosure or bankruptcy, depends on which route they went. That wouldn't be on their credit. So within 1 year, they could go back and buy a new house if their financials were good enough, because they would build their credit up, and we would help them fix their credit and be back in a position to buy. So as someone that was behind on payments that was going to definitely not lose their house, they would no longer lose their house to foreclosure, where they could rebuild their life relatively quick.
So what would be satisfying their outstanding mortgage payments? I mean, you're talking about not having to have any money. How do you just magically come in and satisfy the fact that they're behind 2 or 3 months on their mortgage with their bank?
So the bank was owed almost $600,000. I think it's $578, give or take. Don't quote me on the exact number, but it was owed $578,000. So it was a dismissal of debt. And I'm not going to go through the whole process of how banks write off debt, but they make so much money in this interim, a lot of those big banks, because the way they buy that same debt back from themselves for pennies on the dollar, and FDIC insures 80% of the amount dismissed. It's a scam, but it is what it is. I'm not even going to sit here and try to explain that. We'll jump into that on another episode. But some of those banks become ultra wealthy the way they set themselves up there, which kudos to them. They found loopholes in the system. So what was your main question there, though? Like, why do they write that debt off?
Yeah. Like you're saying, well,
Right.
This family is, facing foreclosure because they're behind on their mortgage, and then you come in and that risk of foreclosure just goes away. That's what I think a lot of people don't understand.
Well, they don't have the foreclosure on their record. So when I, get their debt dismissed, it just says debt dismissed, and they just have missed payments. So it might say 60 or 90 or 180 days late, but it doesn't show no more. It's not a foreclosure on their record where it stays there for 7 to 10 years and you can't buy nothing. If you just miss payments, you can rebuild your credit back very quick. Use a credit card with $500 balance and just pay it off every month. Within a few months, that limits can be raised to $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. But
yeah, I think what Daniel's asking too is like, you're basically coming in to assume that mortgage that's on the balance sheet of XYZ bank, and then you find a new investor to basically come in all cash to wipe out that previous loan, or they get it refied with another lender, etc. So it's kind of it's either assumed with that bank or taken off their books into another bank, into a different investor. Correct?
No. So my apologies. So the way that works is so if there's 500, let's call it just $600,000 worth of debt, the bank is going to accept a lot less. So the bank, on my situation, accepted $175,000 for the house. Why would they do that? Because for every dollar that they have that is outstanding, that is not being paid on, they have to hold $9 in reserves. That's the way it used to be. Not saying it is anymore, but that's the way it used to be. So if it's $100,000, they had to hold $900,000 in reserves. And the exact opposite is true. If you got $1 of debt is that it's producing, they can lend out $9. So that's where they become ultra wealthy. So their whole goal is to get that $600,000 debt off their books as soon as possible. Take that $425,000 loss real quick, which is not a loss. If I want to jump into that, I'll explain how that worked for a vast majority of the big banks, but that isn't a loss. So they just write off that debt. I end up buying the house for $175,000. I turn around and sell for $235,000, $240,000, and the bank's happy. I'm happy. The seller's happy because they don't have that bankruptcy or foreclosure on their record.
Got it. And then, if you assumed that mortgage debt, how long before you would have to start making mortgage payments on that house? Because again, like going back to being able to start with zero money.
So again, I don't assume any of the debt. Zero debt. So that new debt, when I'm buying it at 175, I do a simultaneous close. So I have the debt for 10 seconds, whatever you call it, 20 minutes, an hour, whatever it is, until the next person closes, which is the back end buyer. And a lot of times we use their funds to close if you have it set up correct in a trust. So this is a way to make money with pretty much $0 out of pocket. I had maybe $500 out of pocket, and that's just to set up your LLC. It's just a way to make money.
Kind of like wholesaling in a way, putting two parties together and you make the spread in between the two.
Yep. It's more of a wholesale process, but there's a lot of negotiations that have to go through that process. So you have to send in all the financials for the current owner and all the paperwork that's needed for the bank to accept, your offer, which they do a BPO and all kinds of other processes that are through there, which is basically just an appraisal on the house of what they think it's worth and what it should sell for.
So Kylie, I mean, I guess my question to you is, you obviously had a tremendous amount of success with that. You were able to do tens to hundreds of those kinds of deals. What led you down the path to get into the development space, and how did you arrive where you are today?
Well, that's a great question. So there is a little bit of money that's involved, but if you have the right deal, I hate even calling it a wholesale because it's not a wholesale, but there's ways to make money in this industry that are not $27,000 I was just talking to you guys about that took a year. There's ways to do that in development, but make $1 million on that same process. And it's only one deal. So I could do many more deals. 100x I should say 150x my profit at least. And, just much bigger payouts. So I went towards the development realm, and it's tremendously more lucrative. And, it's not I don't want to call it a wholesale, because a wholesale, in my opinion, and you guys might have done wholesales, but that's someone taking a house, trying to negotiate someone down as low as possible, which is kind of a short sell, and getting them to accept a low dollar, and then just turn around selling it for $5,000, $10,000 more. Right. What I do is
there's no banks involved with that.
No, it's usually just the seller.
It's just the seller and finding another investor.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, and I think you guys understand a little bit, but on our end, when we're doing the developments, we're creating value. We're not trying to negotiate anybody down. I could pay the seller actually more money a lot of times. They want $1 million for the parcel. Okay, well, Andrew, I could pay you 1.2. And they'll be like, well, why can you pay me 1.2? Why would you do that? Well, you give me that 12, 24, 36 months I need to get all the improvements in place. And just depends on the jurisdiction. You can do a lot of times in 12 months, sometimes in Florida in 6 months. But once you get those improvements in place, you turn around and flip that contract to one of the national builders and make a quick $1 million. So a lot of times 6 figures, but 7 figures depends on how many lots there are.
But I guess, the key common denominator between a wholesale, a short sale, and even, doing land development, at least the way that you do it, Kylie, is the common denominator there is that you've already got a buyer lined up, or you have a pretty good idea of who's going to buy it, I would assume.
Yeah. So on the development side, if I am selling the lots, which a lot of them we do, I think 50% of them we're selling out right now to like Fisher Homes or Lombardo or one of those big guys. Yeah, I'll have it contracted within let's call it a couple months after I put it under contract. But I usually have 9 months to a year and a half to get all that in place.
And how in the world do you have to forge a relationship with a home builder? Can you just call their office and say who's in charge of land acquisition? I mean, what does that process look like?
I'll be honest with you, if you have the right parcel, you can just call pretty much any of them. But a lot of times that's only a one-off deal. You're only going to make a little bit of money, and then you're out there hustling and searching for the next deal, which could take you months, years, whatever. You want a system in place. And that's what I always look for. So a system that's repeatable. And on the new home building side, which you guys are familiar with how we do all that, that's very repeatable. I could build thousands of homes every year based on our system. And same thing with land development. But for our side, we always want it to be repeatable. If it's not repeatable, it's not going to be consistent. It's not going to be very profitable.
Yeah. And I guess, for me, with some of these home builders that you have relationships with, how did you forge that with them? Was that a long process? How did you get basically to where you are today with them?
I don't want to say professional schmoozer, but that's kind of what it is. You got to have a strong track record. You got to know what you're doing. And I think whenever I speak to people on the phone, especially just because I did phone sales for so long, people know whatever I say is just going to be true, because I am very confident in what I'm stating. While I'm not the most confident in podcast or on video, over the phone, I did very well at that. And that was something I was very successful at. I presented this. I reached out to every home builder. So let's take a couple steps back. So 2012. Okay. I know Daniel went through this a little bit, some of my background, but 2012, I got into retail development. It was actually one of the guys down in Florida, John Picone. I'm still good friends with him. We started developing a lot of Dollar Trees and Dunkin' Donuts, a lot of Dollar Trees initially. And we built a bunch of other stuff, but that's where we started. John had already done development for quite a while, but with retail development, we always had to schmooze those retail brokers. We also had to figure out where they wanted to be. Okay, cool. We got this site. What are you guys looking for? So we were always in there trying to put parcels together. We're always in there trying to schmooze all the time and go out to I think it's called the ICSC out in Las Vegas. So we'd meet with every major retailer out there. And maybe Andrew, what I'm talking about, but
I've been there, yeah.
Yeah.
January or whatever.
Yeah, I forgot when it is, but we'd fly out there every year. And Yeah, I was thinking it was November, but you're probably right, probably January. But it was great to go out there. We'd meet all the retail brokers, but you figure out how and what they're looking for. And once you start building that relationship, it starts to just go from there. You just got to keep the momentum going. And if they know you can produce, okay, you built your first Dollar Tree with us. Great. Well, here's 2 more to look at. Okay, well, you got those 3 going. Here's 10 more to look at. And all of a sudden, they start giving us a ton of stuff. But your track record does play a big part. I will say, though, track record meant nothing when you're first getting in. You just have to get out there and hustle. If you give up as soon as someone gives you a rejection, it's going to be a rough road. You have to put everything into that and know you're going to get 100 rejections and just keep going forward. It doesn't matter as long as you know where you're headed.
Yeah, I think that's life. And what about on the home builder side?
Same thing. So I had a parcel here in Missouri, and I moved up to Missouri. My wife convinced me to move back to Missouri. 2017. Born and raised here, lived in Florida for 12 years. And I had a parcel that I thought would be a great development, which we're still developing it actually. But it was just parcel I was going to end up using and building on my own. But I started reaching out to every major home builder and trying to build relationships with them, and end up meeting with Fisher Homes, which was one of the first ones, which we have a great relationship with. And I reached out to them, and I just started building a relationship with their inner guy. And once you build a relationship with the inner guy, then you start building a relationship with their, I always forget what he's called, but let's call him, his name's Jorge. I'm friends with him, but it's their regional director, president, I guess, for this Missouri market. I became friends with him, and I pretty much became friends with their attorney and everybody else that's at their office. So I just built relationships that way. And that's what life is all about, is building relationships. If you want to grow your business, you have to build relationships. And I'm not the easiest on doing that because I guess I'm quiet a lot of times, but also I know where I was headed. And, not to get all religious on you, but God steered me in that direction and told me this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So when I knew that was exactly what I was supposed to be doing, I put my effort into all of that. That's where my heart and soul are at right now, which I know how this is going to build, but also building relationships with the right people has went a tremendous way for me. And I've been handed, you guys know this, but we've been handed, I don't know, give or take 15 projects from just Fisher alone, let alone the other home builders.
And I mean, with that though, you can't just go to someone like Fisher and say, I have 1 lot, right? Like what would be, and I know the answer to this probably depends, but like ballpark, how many homes does the parcel need to be able to handle for someone like Fisher or one of these other home builders, or maybe even a small builder? Because I guess, I think, one of the main talking points is like, how can someone with no experience get involved? Let's say someone has a piece of land. How many houses need to be able to be built on that to approach a builder?
That's actually a great question, because I have guys out there right now that are trying to help me find land. I keep trying to give them the best guidance I can because, I don't like doing one-offs. I don't even like doing 5-offs most of the time, just because it's the same amount of work almost. And I know this might sound crazy, but to build 2 houses over here in Wildwood takes almost the same amount of work as building 127 houses over in Wright City.
Yeah, I can totally see that, because the entitlement process is the same.
Yeah,
you still have to do all of the due diligence. It's all the same. So
no,
if anything at scale, right, the margins go down, and you probably get better pricing. And
well, and you guys got to remember this. So like on land development, there's a bunch of different ways to make money in it. So you don't have to be a home builder. You don't have to be a land developer. You could be, and I hate saying this, but kind of a land developer wholesaler. So and the way that goes is like, let's say you put a piece of land under contract. Let's pick out one that we're working on. Let's say Olive Boulevard. Okay. It's called the Overlook. The land's $6 million. I don't have to put much money up. You can have someone put up the deposits for you, so you have zero money out of pocket. I forgot what it was. Maybe it was $10,000 or $20,000 for the deposits. That's money you could get back as long as you're in your option period. But in your option period, you're giving yourself in between 9 to 18 months. Just depends on what you think you're going to need through the jurisdiction to get everything approved. Now, in that process, if it's a good piece of land like this one is, every home builder wants that piece of land. Everybody around here. There's not one home builder that does not want that piece of land because it's in Chesterfield. It's in a prime location. Maybe it's my internet. Whenever you take that piece of land and you entitle it and it's approved for 81 lots like it is, so you got 39 single family homes that will all sell for right around let's call it 900,000 to about 1.5 million. And then you have the townhomes that will sell between 550 to probably 700,000. That piece of land is worth so much more money because it's already approved. And that whole entitlement process that took 12 or 24 months, it took you a little bit of time, but I could turn around and wholesale a piece of property, make probably $2 to $4 million off that, just the wholesale process.
Just getting it entitled, you mean, and without doing any of the infrastructure, just like, hey, this is now approved. But for entitlements, like, do entitlements need to be completed like per a set of drawings, like, or can it just be, this is land, it's entitled for residential use, and it's now worth XYZ more dollars than a piece of raw dirt?
Well, you could get, and there's tons of different phases you could be in, like on the development side. So like, let's say you want to exit out a lot earlier than what I was speaking about, where you don't go through the whole entitlement process. You get some preliminary approvals relatively cheap, and have that in place where you're not spending a ton of money, and turn around and wholesale and make $500,000 where you're out within a few months.
Now, with that example of making 500,000, like just ballpark, what would the land value start at versus getting $500,000 worth of increased intrinsic value?
Well, so again, let's just stick with the overlook so it keeps it easy for numbers. The overlook, it was a $6 million piece of land. At that point, it's probably worth more than $7 million, but you're trying to $7-8 million because you already know that they're willing to accept 81 lots. You already know the city's willing to accept that. Doesn't mean it's been through the whole entitlement process. Doesn't mean everything's approved. Doesn't mean all the variances and setbacks and everything are approved or zoning's approved. But it depends on how far along you take it in that process. Whether you got zoning, which it does have zoning, whether you have certain variance approvals, it depends on how much you can sell it for at that point. If you go through the whole process, it's a very valuable piece of land because all they have to do is come in and put the infrastructure in, and they know how much they're going to sell each house for. So they just do their math backwards. So we're selling a home at $1 million. Our average lot cost needs to be 25%. So we know we can pay $250,000 per lot. Let's just do the math. 250 times 81, which obviously all the lot costs will be slightly different. That's $20,250,000 on gross that we know we could actually sell that for if we really wanted to. Some of them are townhomes, so they're going to be a little cheaper, but just for general numbers, let's keep it simple. And then they subtract out the horizontal cost, which, what is that about? I think it's 8.5 million. I'm adding in all kinds of interest and everything else, minus the 6 million of land. If you could get them to pay full cost with everything, you'd make $5.7 million on that deal, which would be a hard one to push because, the townhomes are not going to be quite that expensive. They're a little bit cheaper, but it'd be about $5.7 million that you can make on that deal if you took it through the entitlement process.
And through the entitlement process, like, do you have to get entitlements with drawings?
Oh, yeah. If you go through the complete process, absolutely.
And then, well, I know that, going through the entitlement process, it's possible where, and I mean, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but with the overlook, I mean, that initially was supposed to have a lot more than 81 lots, right? Like it was like 133, something like that.
Just so you're mixing up a couple of them, but it's supposed to be 103. It's all right.
103.
Yeah, 103 was what we originally sketched it out at, and I shouldn't say we because that was a different engineering firm.
Sure.
But once I got George engaged, which he already had been engaged on the project, but once I engaged him personally, we had to run a topo survey, which tells you, what kind of density you're really going to get because of the drop-offs, and that reduced it down to 81. Now,
Got it.
There are ways of going about it and increasing it, but costs go up astronomically. We're already at $945,000 on retaining wall there. You could easily take that up to a $2 or $3 million retaining wall, which just be a huge wall, but and get the 103 lots. But I just didn't think the math the way we needed it to.
Yeah, $1 million retaining wall for an extra 20 lots. Just I get it. Not feasible. And when you said density, are you talking about like soil compaction? Is that what you're talking about?
Part of it. So we did do soil testing, which it does have some of the plastics in it that you're looking for, but it's not perfect what we would need to build to reduce the retaining wall cost. So
got it. And so, with that particular project, started out 103 lots. Now you're at 81 lots. I mean, what else could go wrong? Like, is it possible to...
You're taking all the risk out when you're only in the entitlement phase. Like, what risk are there?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Because, as people that have never done this before, that are looking to break into this specific asset class, someone first coming into this super green, they're going to be just hyper focused on what could go wrong. Right. But you're saying, with entitlements, is like there's really, once those are complete, there's not a whole lot that can go wrong. I was going to give it a what if. Like, what if the engineer that wrote a pass on some aspect of the project was wrong? Then that wasn't uncovered until part of the way through the process.
You're always going to have stuff like that. That happens all the time. So, and here's the thing, though. So usually you get the engineer on this situation. It's George Stock with Stock and Associates over in Chesterfield. That's doing all the engineer work. He's top notch. But with that being said, things do get missed, but the city has to write or approve it as well. So their engineers and their whole team has to look at it. So not only do you got George Stock and his whole team looking at it, which are a bunch of professionals, you have the city engineer and all of their professionals looking at it, which, the city obviously is nowhere near as what George is going to be, but, they still have to take a look at it. They still have to have their whole team look at it and say, hey, these are the issues we see, and this is what we see possibly coming up.
With your infrastructure and all of that, like if you're just massively increasing the value through entitlements, and this is a question for you personally, why not just turn and burn projects like right after entitlement? Why even mess with the infrastructure if you can already get massive value out of just getting the land entitled? Seems like you could do a lot more at a time with less work.
You can, but you've heard of relationships. You have a relationship with your fiance or whatever she is, correct? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So for the relationship, you have to keep that relationship happy. So in certain situations, I could turn and burn it real quick to someone where I just did the entitlements. Now, to keep the relationship, someone that doesn't have the whole horizontal construction team in place, and Let me explain that a little bit. But where we put in the water, roads, electric, all of the sanitary, lift station, landscaping, amenities, where we put in everything, where they don't have a team like that that's local, they love people like us. So not only are we doing the entitlements, which is very timely, it takes 12 months here in Missouri on average, we're also handling the horizontal construction, which takes another 4 to 6 months. So they just come in, they have a shovel ready lot, they love us, they absolutely love us. So like, wow, this person's great, and we're so valuable to them. Like as a home builder as well, I love when we go to Florida, and especially in Walton County, and they already have it entitled. I'm like, wow, this is great, we don't even got to do any work. And I'm joking, we still got plenty of work to do, but when you don't have to do the entitlement process, that is so mundane. Like it's not hard. It's just, when you got 20, 30, 40, 50 projects going on, you have to be on top of it. It could just be an issue like easements. It could be, city council meetings. Like there's so many things you have to go through, and that process takes a long time. So,
and I think Blue Onyx, you said like 17 projects or so with Fisher Homes alone. Like, well, I know you've got 12 in Missouri and 7 in
Florida. So only 3 of them are under works in Florida right now. The other 4 were still pending. So
got it. And so with like city council meetings, because I know like as far as due diligence, we've got to do, not only, and I've got a list here. So like soil testing, topographic survey, environmental review, utility capacity studies, floodplain watershed analysis, all the way down to city council and planning commission vote. Do you, Kylie Brown, yourself need to be sitting somewhere, at a courthouse and just like letting these big heads talk? Like, how do you do that at scale?
Well, you forgot a bunch of the other studies, the bat studies and all that.
Oh yeah, bat studies.
That's Missouri related.
Ancient Indian burial ground studies.
Actually, that is true, especially for my Burns Mill project.
Oh yeah,
and you probably know that very well. But there's a lot of that's an ancient Indian ground, and there's tons of arrowheads on there. So there's things we got to look for. But your question, we go to city council meetings all the time. So like next on the 12th, I have a city council meeting with Dardine Prairie. So next Wednesday at 6:30, which you can watch any of these on Zoom. So if you ever want to jump on them, you're more welcome to. But it's not usually that exciting. It's usually them telling us what they want changed, and then anybody that lives close by, they usually come as well if they want to say their good remarks or their bad remarks, and we address whatever issues there could be. Because our goal is not to build something that is going to upset a bunch of people, which our Bates Road Dardine Prairie project, people love it. They absolutely love it. They want it. They think something needs to be done there. So we got support of that. And I think the city supports it for the most part. There's a few things that they want us to try to change. I just don't think it's going to work because MoDOT's not going to let us have an entry come on off the South Service Road. It's not going to happen because of site distance. But, there's things that we'll pitch out there. But I think we'll get full approvals this next Wednesday. So back to what you're saying. Sorry. Most of the time I just sit there. Sometimes I get up and talk and say, this is why this project's going to be beautiful. This is why it's going to be great. But I also hire on the best attorneys if need be, or the best engineers to get up there and speak for me because they're the professionals. I'm just a developer / builder.
And just side question, we were jokingly talking about Indian burial grounds, but when I was in college at Southeast Missouri State, and I can't remember the professor's name, I wish I could give him a shout out, but he could always joke with me. He's just like, Patrick, if you ever find an arrowhead, just put it in your pocket. So what is, if you're out there and you do find an arrowhead, what do you do with that? Are you supposed to call someone, or do those guys just put it in their pocket?
So it depends on your ethics and morals there. Yeah, I mean, there are issues you can run into that could actually stop your whole project from moving forward. But you should know that, I would say, within 90 days of you starting, your due diligence on a project. Oh, yeah. So you usually
start digging up once. If you start digging up treasure, you're going to have an issue.
Yeah, and that is super important. I'm glad you brought that up. So that is so important. Like if you're new to the development industry, or if you're just investing in one of our projects, that's stuff we find out right away. We usually do our research right away, so we know, oh, hey, there's bats out there. Hey, there's water delineation, so we need the Army Corps engineers and all that stuff out there. Or whatever issue is, we get that addressed right away.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just arrowheads. I mean, you could uncover a crime scene. As a matter of fact, I think you guys did uncover something. I guess you could technically call it a crime scene. It was a stolen truck or something like that. Someone just ditched.
Yeah, endangered animals too. I know. I don't know if you guys. I'm a big golfer. Liberty National Golf Course. It's they play. It's right outside of New York City. They play some PGA Tour events there or whatever, and they found like this endangered owl, like right along the coastline where they were like intending to make the nicest holes on the course. So they had to like totally re-engineer it and kind of go in and around to change the whole layout of the course, really. So
Have you guys ever been to Marco Island, Florida?
I've been everywhere around there besides Marco
So
Island. Yeah.
speaking of owl, there's a species of ground owl down there. I don't know if it's endangered, but it's definitely protected. And there are just dozens and dozens of lots on this island that nobody can do anything with because there's there's a family of owls living there. I always thought that was funny.
Yeah, we've been pretty lucky. So we've only ran into, where we had bats. So it delayed us 30 days, but we expect that now. No, it wasn't too bad, honestly. So it delayed us about 30 days from when we closed in September until we could actually start removing trees in October because they fly south, I guess.
Very cool. And so going back to like the relationships, how did Fisher Homes even get woke up to who the heck you are? Like, did you reach out to them, or did they hear about you through your retail track record? Because I know you mentioned you were doing Dollar Trees, Dollar Generals, Publix, Dunkin' Donuts, all this stuff. How did that relationship come about?
No, I reached out to everybody that builds in Missouri. Got a call from me. And the funny part is, once you start building relationships and your name starts getting out there, everybody starts calling you, and that's cool. At that point, usually you're not trying to work with many other people because you have so much going on that you can't possibly keep up with it. But once you build that relationship and you show you can produce, it's pretty easy after that point.
what do the expenses look like on the entitlement front? I feel like that's kind of a wide range that people don't really understand. If you could like kind of walk us through what that process looks like, because you're the one kind of taking the risk on with that, right? I mean, at least know with our investors, they're not exposed to any of the entitlement risk. So what are you putting into that process? I know obviously it's a tremendous amount of time, but like, what are you paying for? What makes it expensive? What makes a deal cheaper? If you could walk us through that a bit, that'd be great.
So expensive versus cheaper, obviously land, on what you need for the deposit. So a lot of the people that own expensive land, they want bigger deposits. So that's first and foremost. That's not always true. I usually can negotiate down a lot, but we have a piece over here in Lake St. Louis. I don't remember how much it is. Like, I think we're going to be paying about $19 million for it. We got to put up $250,000 versus $25,000, which is probably our typical. I'd say somewhere between $10,000 to $25,000, but it's a deposit. So it don't have to be your money. It could be money you get back, in 9 months, if you flip the contract. So that's first and foremost. Deposits are, I'd say, one of your main costs out of pocket. That could go on a credit card, even though you put that money out. So after that, you engage an engineer. Now, this all goes back to what your plan is. Are you planning to wholesale it? Are you planning to do all the horizontal construction? Are you planning to build it vertically? That changes your cost tremendously, because wherever you're trying to get it to, you can do it relatively cheap if you're just trying to do a flip. So you engage your engineer, have them do a site plan, then you meet with city council right after you have a site plan, even if it's not a feasible one. Like we're talking about with Daniel, the 103 lots at the Overlook, it really wasn't feasible. Not saying we couldn't make it work, but it would have been very expensive to make that work. But you go present it to city council, you get their feedback. So at this point, you're in very cheap. There's not much money out of pocket. You've got your original site plan. And if you work with a good engineer, they'll usually do a site plan for you for free. Just a rough sketch out. And not saying you shouldn't pay them, but give them $1,000 or whatever, something, just to get it out. So you're out about $1,000. There are a lot of studies like Daniel had mentioned that need to be ran through. But if you're just trying to get some kind of preliminary approval and then flip it for a quick, $50,000, $100,000, $150,000, get the preliminary approval and flip that contract. There's tons of people that want to take it over and know that, hey, we can do this. The city is suggestive to it. They like it, and you can flip that contract for a decent chunk of money.
If someone wanted to make $100,000, just use a round number, $100,000, and flip it just through entitlements, how big, like as far as acreage is? And I know the answer to that depends, but let's just talk like greater St. Louis in an area that is in high demand. Well, how big does a piece of land need to be in order to make $100,000 on flipping it after entitlements are complete?
Depends what you put there. So I hate saying that, but let's call it, I don't like anything really under 5 acres. I know Scotty will take stuff under 3 acres. And I don't really care for it because it's the same amount of work for a lot less profit. But if you could build, let's say 11 units per acre and it's 3 acres and you build 30 plus units, depends on what, and not that usually doesn't map that way because retention and everything else that has to be on there. That could be a great project. You could make a quick $50,000 to $100,000 even off of 3 acres. But if it has offsite retention, yeah, you could easily make that easily.
I mean, and what does land go per acre in one of these areas? Like, would you say like around 10,000 an acre? Or is that
it's dirt cheap?
That's
Jeffco money.
I was going to say that's Jeffco. That's definitely Jefferson.
Yeah. So anybody that doesn't know, that's Jefferson County, just right south of St. Louis.
Yeah.
But no, so that's like Jeffco dollar per acre. So if you're looking at, let's call it St. Louis County, but you're more in West County of St. Louis County, it's on average probably 250,000 per acre. That's probably about average, because you're talking about what? Well, it makes sense. You got density you can do there. Depends where you're at. If you're in Wildwood, and if you're in town center, you can do high density. Outside of that, it's 1 per 3 acres. So it's
$250,000 per acre. That's insane. Just from being in a high demand area. That's nuts. I was going to just say, like, just for people listening to this, like Jefferson County, Missouri is maybe like 30 minutes from St. Louis. You just cross that line, and it's like over 100 times the cost per acre. And so, okay, let's say if someone, they want to make $100,000, they find 3 acres, they pick it up for $750,000. How much money do they need to have to put up for something like that? Because at this point, like, you can't even get like a fixed interest loan on land until it's zoned for residential. Is that correct?
There's so many variables to what you're asking there. So where's it at? What's the density that you think the city will approve? So let's just go with one I'm trying to work right now. Okay. You got one right here off Manchester. I'm not going to give the address because I don't have it under contract yet. I thought I could only do 22 units. I went and met with city council. I think it was yesterday or day before. Joe Vintage, great guy over here in Wildwood. He says I could do, I forgot what he said, but I think it's 4,000 to 5,000 square foot per unit. So you do the math. I think it's a little over 12 acres. 12 acres times 4,300 or 43,560. You're at 522,720 square feet. And just so everybody's on the same page, I took what 1 acre is, which is 43,560 times 12 acres. And 30% of that is just roads, offsite retention or onsite retention and everything else. So let's times that by 0.7. You're left with about 365,000 square feet. And if you divide it, let's go with the bigger number that he said. So divide it by 5,000 square feet for each lot. That would leave me with 73 units I could build there. I thought we could only do 22. If we could do 73, I don't mind spending over $2 million for this piece of parcel where I only offered them $1.25 million. That's where that value could increase tremendously for them. And what was your final question though? I want to make sure I do.
How much money do you need to have? Like, is it just like throwing up, $10,000-$15,000 to the seller and giving yourself 9 to 18 months to close on it? Is that kind of how it works?
It depends. So like Daniel, say you brought me a piece of land. You know my character though, so it's a little different there. You put up the deposit or you don't even have it under contract. I'll work with you on that deal. Hey, that's an excellent deal, Daniel. Let's get under contract. And here's, your fee for doing it. If you're not putting no money out of pocket, here's $50,000, $100,000 because I'm going to turn around and sell it and make, $4 or $5 million off of it. That's worth it for me all day long. I didn't have to find that piece of land. And so, for example, usually I do it per lot though. So like I'd say, hey, Daniel, bring me a piece of land and I'll offer you a lot agreement. So what that means is, hey, we know we could let's go with 50 lots just to keep it easy, okay? Mm-hmm. And if our sales price is X amount of dollars, I'll pay you $1,000 per lot. Or if it's this amount per lot, I'll pay you $2,000 per lot. So you can make either $50,000 or $100,000 just on bringing that piece of land to me. Just giving you, how that would work on, from my end. I'm happy to do that because I didn't have to find that piece of land, and that piece of land could be worth a lot of money to a builder like myself or one of these other national builders.
You're talking about a lot about the flipping process. Do you ever flip the land? You kind of talked about with the relationship element of it. You see most of the deals through to completion, though, correct?
Completion as in flipping the lots or
doing all of the horizontal.
Yeah, minimally doing all the horizontal. I think that's a great point to exit because at that point you're on average making 7 figures plus, and our investors are making great money. So yeah, that's a great point for us to exit at that point.
Yeah, and I guess after all that entitlement phase piece of everything, like what does the horizontal development piece, what does that take? Just, by running the show on that end of things, kind of walk us through from, basically time that you close to breaking ground to the project being completely finished. Like, what does that process look like?
Every project's going to be different, but let's just go with the 81 lots that we've been speaking about over in Chesterfield. So the time we close on it, let's call it December, the end of December or January 1. That'll probably be about the date we close. From that date, it is winter and it is Missouri. So there's nothing predictable about Missouri in the winter. It could be 80 degrees or it could be negative 20. So a little bit of difference in temperature. With that being said, it probably should take us about 4 to 6 months to handle all the horizontal construction. I no longer do that. I outsource all that to the professionals like J.H. Barra, Kolb, and all those guys. They're the professionals that handle all that. So I don't have to be on site as long as I have a project manager out there, but I do go check on them all the time. So at that point, we could be selling lots by, call it June, July, as long as we have the plat recorded, which We should have that done in January/February. So we should be good to go at that point.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot to talk about here. Like my gears are already turning, but I think we'd probably make this into a part 2 very, very easily.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If you guys have any other questions you want to throw at me real quick, a final question or something that you think maybe one of your investors or someone that asks you questions all the time, what is their main thing that they want to know? I'm happy to address that.
Really, they just want to know. They want to know the risk, right? And I think generally speaking, and I've said this several times before on our webinars, but generally speaking, the 2 largest risk factors are who's going to buy it and can you get it approved for its intended use. I mean, by the time we even close on a property, both of those things are already knocked out. Surely by the time, and by the time we deploy investor capital into one of these projects, we already know what the profit is going to be. We already know when they're going to pay per a schedule. There's not going to be any sort of entitlement surprises because all of that's already been figured out. So then what's left?
Well, there still are risks. So what do you usually state? Because there are definitely risks. I'm not going to say nothing's risk free, but there's still risks.
So what I usually tell my people is, well, it's like, okay, we already know who's going to buy it. It's already entitled. So then what else is there? Well, you still have to understand the market that you're building, because something could happen to Fisher. And I know they've never defaulted on a contract. They've never backed out on us, but I mean, that doesn't mean they're not invincible. So I tell them they could back out of the contract. I tell them, God forbid something could happen to Kylie and he becomes incapacitated. But I know you've got most every leg of your operation decentralized from you. I mean, even if something happened to you, one of the guys from Fisher Homes would step in and resume operations as far as their pipeline goes. Aside from that, now I'm thinking like, what else is there? I mean, what if there's like a major market swing and the need for homes is not what it was when we first got this land? Like what happens then?
Yep. So great question. That's why we purchase where we purchase. You're always looking for specific things. So first off, at Blue Onyx, what we focus on is 5-star schools. That's not the only thing. There has to be great growth. There could be a 3-star school, but there's a reason why we buy in the 5-star school districts, because we know it's going to sell. We know the values are going to stay there. Like Town and Country, anybody that's familiar with Missouri, you can go through the worst market crash and the houses aren't going to change. If it goes down 2, 3, 4%, I'd be surprised. I'd be amazed actually if it drops at all, because Midwest is not hit the same way that like Florida is, where they have huge spikes. And I shouldn't say all of Florida, but Orlando market, some of the big markets. Completely different than some of our markets in Florida. But we don't have those huge spikes. So areas that we purchase in, not saying it's 100% protected, but they're always highly desired areas. They're always in those high growth areas that we know is growing. We've ran our UMR reports. We know exactly what the growth rate looks like. We know what is expected. And don't get me wrong, that can change, but how does that affect the investor? From our end, it usually doesn't, but let's say it does slow down because, interest rates go to 15%. I guess that could be something that comes up, which I don't think that's going to happen. I don't believe that's going to happen, but that could be something that happened. Now it just slows down your absorption rate. So now you're not selling 9 homes every quarter, you're selling 3 homes every quarter, but that's already built into the performance. It doesn't eliminate all risk because there's always a risk, but it's just a matter of time. The economy always goes through cycles, and it's going through a cycle right now, which I don't think any of us have ever seen. And I don't think any of us will ever probably see again. It's going to be an interesting one, but I think it's going to be amazing, honestly. I think it's going to be great outside of some of the crazy stuff that's happening in the world. I think it's going to be great, honestly.
I think a lot of it was touched on. I think it's great for people to kind of see the ins and outs of how you got to where you are, why this is a successful model, other things that people can do to, be a part of the process. But I guess, kind of on a more emotional level, like, what are you most proud of to get to this point? Like, what does this mean for you and for your future?
I got a corny response for some people, but honestly, it's all about my relationship with Jesus. Honestly, like everything I've done, I was explaining to someone yesterday. They're a banker over at Triad Bank, great lady I met yesterday, and the guy I was with her, they're really cool. But no, the relationship I built with the Lord, honestly, because he put me on this path, and I know exactly where I'm headed because of what he told me. But that relationship's invaluable, because I used to, as a ex-professional motocross racer, and I had so many injuries I didn't get to race really that much pro, but I always pushed everything as hard as I could because I thought I could control it. And when I left it all to Jesus, so anything I do, whether it's working with you guys or working with anybody, I pray on it. I don't even have to stress about it anymore. Like, I would say that's my number one thing I am happy about in my life. Obviously family's right after that, but that's my number one thing. But yeah, guys, it's time to wrap it up. It's a little after 10 already. We got a million other things going on. So I greatly appreciate it. And again, thanks to the Lord Jesus Christ. Thanks guys for being on. And we look forward to seeing you guys next week.